saying the word braiding made me think of something that, again, there's almost like two different ways I'm thinking of this. And so I'm going to name both, and I'd love to hear what comes up for you. I was thinking that, of course, so many of these traditional skills have been all but lost. I mean, they exist, but in terms of going back, however many hundreds or thousands of years, each family would have had people that knew how to do these things and then would have directly passed it down and down and down. That's not the case for most of us these days. Um, and I was like, "Ah, there's a kind of grief that I can feel where we've lost that. I don't know. In fact, I'd love to know how you learned to ferment. It sounds like there was a kind of, you were being taught as you went along by the microbes to an extent. But certainly personally, I didn't have someone to teach me. I was kind of learning as I went along. Obviously, one can read, books and things like that. So this or that type of teacher, but we have lost that way of being handed down this birthright, these gifts. And yet, simultaneously, I was like, with so many of these things, it kind of feels like it's in our DNA, where our ancestors have done these things for so long. It feels as though there is a kind of sort of blood and bone knowing that starts to come back, where I know in the early days of me fermenting, I would kind of feel called to do something and be like, that doesn't seem like, it's not how I read I was supposed to do this thing. And then would find out afterwards, like, oh, this is a known way of doing it. But I didn't intellectually know that, I don't think, but my hands knew somehow. And so there is a kind of like gift from our longer ancestors that we are still being handed down. So anyway, that was a kind of a mix of both things, but that came to mind when you spoke about braiding for some reason. But I'd love to hear your sense of that.
Oh, I completely agree. I think I think because when I started fermenting, I there wasn't a lot out there, nothing really. Um, I had a friend, a neighbor who was a farmer at one point, and she grew vegetable for seed. And so she grew these beautiful Hubbard squash, and they were beautiful, and they had this beautiful flesh, and they're for seed, so they're the best of the best. Um,
Mm.
Yet her crop was the little seeds inside, all of this beautiful food. They literally, she invited my sons down and said, "Will you come smash pumpkins with me?"
Oh,
And they
wow.
put out a huge tarp to open them up to scoop out the seeds. Um, and then, we both were like, this is really sad to waste all this food. It goes in the compost pile, but still, it's still food.
Mm.
Um, and so that was one of the first moments where I'm looking at this food. It's open. It's way too much to put in my refrigerator. As soon as an apple is plucked, or you know any any food or vegetable is plucked, it's a race against time to
Mm.
spoilage, and fermentation is just controlling that in our favor. And so that was the first time I was like, I wonder if I can ferment this. And at the time, I laugh at myself now. I didn't fully understand the science, which is, the lactobacillus consume the starch, the sugar in the vegetable, and create CO2 and acid. And it's the acid that does the preservation, because once it's below 4.6 on the pH scale, it's safe, and it can stay stable for years. But I didn't understand that. So I went out on the internet. Can I ferment squash? Nothing. Can I ferment pumpkins? Nothing. I bet if you put that in there now, you get and but that was the first time where I started to realize, you know, since nothing said no way that's going to kill you, I thought, well, let's try and see what happens. And then it was game on. And I was just fermenting everything, whether, from spinach to foraged greens to, and so I think, yeah, it was all self-taught and it was all observing and who does what and the microbes. It's kind of the beauty of fermentation. You knew that you could go off script. And I think that's the part that's easier or harder for some folks is to understand that, if you understand the microbes are making things acidic and that's going to keep it safe. And if it smells fine and looks fine, it can be funky smelling, pickly or whatever, it is fine. Whereas there's so many other food practices that aren't that way, especially, some of the modern ones. And so people are scared, like we've been told not to leave stuff on our counter. And, this goes against that. But then once you do and it works, then it's, then it's just the dials, you've got the dials of the heat, the time, how much salt, whatever. And if you're understanding their needs, the microbes' needs, then you can do anything. I mean, you can just create the flavors you wanna enjoy. And I think that's where the real fun comes in. And you realize you really are. I would say they're in control, absolutely, of the whole process. You're just trying to kind of steer them and shepherd them to create what you would like. But I think that's what I love about it. It is so accessible. And I think I know so many people who were terrified and then they do their first and second jar of whatever and suddenly they're absolutely hooked, Again, is it the microbes who's domesticating us or and it's a meditation for so many people too. They have a fermentation practice in that slowing down becomes their meditation. For those of us that can't sit still and meditate, it's another style, I think, of a walking meditation, and that you're doing this thing, you're submitting to its time frame, especially while you're waiting for it to ferment and cure. As you're watching it, you're seeing the transformation.
Oh, I love that so much. Yes, for me, it's a real rhythm of my days where I'm always have something fermenting, something that's been fermenting that I'm eating. And I think very similar to how as we begin to reconnect to the land and the seasons, I think this has its own rhythm too. That's what calls us back to ourselves, calls us back to our bodies.